So I took on your challenge today, and Jocelyn and I have read the first 2 chapters of Romans. And it reminded me why I fundamentally disagree with Paul and the Old Testament in general, because Paul represents that model, and he is doing a very good job of tying Jesus into that model. Here's why I disagree with the portrayal of God in the Old Testament. And this is simply my perspective. By encountering books like Tao Te Ching, some Hindu texts, and even the Kolbrin, there is a unified motif that the source of being is non-being. The source of that which exists is that which exists not. The source of everything that moves is that which is immovable. The source of everything that is known is that which is unknown. The source of everything that can be identified is that which cannot be identified. The source of everything that fills the space is emptiness. Tao Te Ching says, you have many spokes that spin the wheel, but it is the center hole that makes the wheel go round. And that center is immovable. That center creates the space for everything. That center is constantly, continuously, and eternally at peace. And once again, I would go beyond and underline the fact that when we think about God as somebody that exists, we're thinking about created things. And given this perspective, the God of the Old Testament doesn't fit the bill whatsoever. He has an identity. He has limitations. He has human-like characteristics. He gets irritated. He gets jealous. Jealous meaning that you can't get jealous if you have everything. And there are multiple times when he says, I'm a jealous God. If you are everything, you cannot be jealous. Once again, in Paul, contrary to what you were saying about God so loved the world that he sent his only son, and God is not a bully. Paul, in Romans chapter 1 and 2, talks a lot about God's wrath against the people who XYZ. I mean, he puts them in a camp. And that's why when I read Paul, I have developed the ability to dare and question him. You don't question him, in my opinion. You take it as gospel. And the way that I read Paul is the way that I talk to you. The way that I read Paul is the way that I listen to a pastor. To me, he is not an extraordinary being. He is made extraordinary thanks to Luke, because in just about every chapter that Luke has on Paul, every chapter contains a miracle. And it's all right. Perhaps Paul was a miraculous person. But I would argue that what he was doing was trying to make sense of things rather than channeling divine truth that cannot be questioned. So when somebody tells me that when somebody is basing their worldview on Paul's epistles, I see them as still being under the spell. That sums it up. I see them still being under the spell of not being able to question, criticize, and think for themselves. And that's a lot of Christians. A lot of Christians have not been able to reclaim the ability to think for themselves because they've been given the only game in town, like you said so perfectly, and they have not allowed themselves to go beyond the Iron Curtain. Christianity has a thick Iron Curtain. Everything that's outside of it is the devil, and I would argue against it, because if you have been exposed to the only game in town, you don't get to have an opinion. Good night.